Um, so, good afternoon, I think. Thanks for coming. I just want to start by expressing my gratitude for being able to give a presentation, for the folks that I work with for like letting me do this, and also for the community here for just being open. It's just really incredible to be part of a community that is so willing to learn and share the things they know. So this is mindfulness, meditation, and cybersecurity. And you might be like, what? So I'll talk about why we're doing this talk. But before we do that, I'm going to invite you, you can close your eyes or not close your eyes, but just take a deep breath. If you don't breathe, you're going to die. So this is what this talk is going to be like. So I don't even remember the slides or what's in the slides, so we're both winging it. So who am I? My name is Aqeel. I am a citizen of the cosmos. Just like you, I'm a human being. I live on planet Earth. Welcome. I am a parent, a partner, a pen tester, and I was a yoga teacher for 15 years full-time before I transitioned into cybersecurity, which is an odd combination. I've heard a lot of times people like, what do you mean? That's really weird. So I have also been practicing many different forms of mindfulness, meditation, or yoga for over 20 years. So how does this fit together? So, why are we here? That's really, really a big question, and I couldn't answer that in 15 minutes or 15 years. But suffice to say, we're going to talk about what mindfulness is, how this applies to everyday life, but also in the context of cybersecurity. So, what we can talk about is mindfulness really is just cultivating awareness. And you're already aware because you're alive, so congratulations, you're doing it. It's just, are you aware that you're aware? That's really a challenging question to answer, and sometimes you're not aware that you're aware, and that's okay. We can talk about stress management because the field that we're in, whether you're new in the field or you are a leader or you're like a noob like me, whatever level it is that you're interacting with cybersecurity, whether that's on the user end or on the provider end, it's stressful because a lot of shit can happen. So the last thing is communication, because ultimately everything that we're doing is about relationships, and you're always in some kind of relationship, and you're always in a relationship with yourself. So that doesn't go anywhere. And what the end of this presentation will be is an experience. So I'm going to talk for some time, but I'm going to actually give you the opportunity to practice, because I can talk to you all day at length about what this is and how to do it and why you should do it, but ultimately it doesn't mean anything unless you've done it. And if you've never done any meditation at all, great. If you've done like years and years of meditation, great. So let me ask you a question before we get started. Who has done some kind of mindfulness or meditation? Just groovy. All right, cool. So that's actually kind of impressive. My hair's standing up, but you can't tell. So, I will approach all of this with humor and lightness because this shit gets real heavy real fast. You can see I have memes here. I like memes. Memes are funny. But essentially what we're doing is it's about real life. The business impact and the professional impact is real, but this is all about real life because you're a person. You're a person before you're a professional. So don't forget it. So why did I think this was an important topic to bring up? Because I'm new in this industry, but I knew from the outside, burnout is huge. There's a statistic there. There's a link to that statistic. I don't know how actually valuable that statistic is, but I can tell you, you probably have experienced some point where you're like, I'm done. whether that's like in a day that was hard or at the end of your day, every day. There's a point where you're like, I'm done. And imagine that happening to you for like most of your life, and that adds up. It's like sleep. If you don't sleep, you progressively get more and more cranky and grumpy and tired. And so we all have this. We're all subject to the same things. So being a person is really hard. And I want to stress that as a person who is entering into this field, I was acutely aware that there's a big gap between the experiences of the people in this industry. Some people are like super technical people, and some people are super people. But all of us have the backgrounds that we have and the lives that we have, and that's very different. But being a person is universally challenging. So these practices apply to everybody. And I was teaching people for over a decade, and it didn't matter to me who was in the room. I was going to share what I was going to share because they're valuable. So essentially, the ultimate goal is to cultivate compassion, and that is to make sure that life is more wonderful for everyone. That's really the goal. And if you can get behind that, you can get behind this practice. And it's not pleasant all the time. So when I talk about compassion, and I'll go a little bit more into that, I'm curious, what do you think that I mean? Anybody? What is compassion to you? If you don't want to say something, just think about it. Yeah. Empathy. Anybody else?
Literally being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Yeah, great. So if this is a word you haven't interacted with a lot, and you're like, why are we talking about this in cybersecurity? It matters, and it really all starts with you. So everything that you do in your life ripples outward. I think we live in a culture that teaches us that answers and problems and their solutions all come from outside of us, but it doesn't. So that's what I can tell you from having spent most of my adult life doing these things. The answer is in you. You just may or may not be aware of it. So what is mindfulness? How do I translate that into cybersecurity? And I would say the best way to do that is this just phrase, situational awareness. And, it gets thrown around a lot, but that's basically what mindfulness is. It's having the understanding of what is the situation that you're in and how are you experiencing what you're experiencing. And that requires you to kind of step back from your thoughts and your feelings as things are coming up for you. So it's a skill. It's not something that I think is innate for most people. Most of the time we react very quickly to stuff. And, in the industry, we're being told to react. You gotta lock this down. You gotta do this patch or whatever. So yes, and you have to understand what you're looking at and why it matters to you. So practice makes practice. That's what I like to say. It doesn't make better or perfect. It makes practice. The more you do it, the more you do it. So, and also people would always ask me like, well, I'm not consistent with it. And I would tell them 5 minutes a day is better than no minutes a day. And 1 minute a day is also better than no minutes a day. So you took a breath to start, so you already did it. You're done. Good job. It really is just paying attention to what you're paying attention to. So when you were taking that breath, maybe you could tell that you were breathing. Maybe that is too much for you to pay attention to, but you start where you start. So why do we do it? I love this meme, G.I. Joe, right? I realized, knowing is half the battle is like what this is all about. And I realized in my 20s, like the other half is dealing with shit. So you have to know what's coming up for you, but you also have to know what your options are. And most of us don't always know that. So that's why compassion matters. And when I say compassion, what I mean is everything is part of a process that you are also part of. And that almost no one has full awareness of what that process is. It's a mystery. We're all part of that same mystery. When you realize that, it is like putting yourself in someone else's shoes because you are in their shoes. So, when you have this understanding, this baseline understanding, and you're approaching situations from that place, you can see that you may know something that someone else might not know, or you might not know something that they know. Whatever it is, you are then open and you have to communicate. So this already makes it possible for you to reflect on what you're saying and what you're hearing. And that, again, that's a skill. It's not something that's innate. So briefly, compassion in action, it's recognizing that all things, including ourselves, are participating in a process of which we have only limited awareness. That's a different way of talking about compassion than, empathy. Empathy is great. It's really important. But it is like there's something broader than that. So we're on equal footing with everyone. You are in the same shoes as everyone else. If gravity stopped, we'd all be fucked, right? No one would be spared. So, we're all on the same standing. And how does this come into stress management? Well, you understand there's patterns coming up, and then you can see you do or you don't have choices. If you don't know what your choices are, you can't make a choice, or you've already made a choice, but you don't know that you've made a choice. So emotional self-awareness is critical. Most of us probably aren't aware of what our emotions are in a given moment. I think most of us know when we're angry. Sometimes we know when we're sad or we're bored. Right, that's pretty much the range of what I think is accessible for most of us. But being human is very interesting. And sometimes you don't know what you're feeling until later. So this is a whole world we'll explore. And I'll share at the end some resources that I have found extremely valuable in understanding emotions. But essentially, once you know your own feelings, you can start to see that you have biases. You assume things when you see things. This is normal. We have biases, they call them unconscious biases. You have biases that you don't even know that you have, which is very interesting. But when you do know you have them, then they're not unconscious biases anymore. And a simple way that I like to approach this, or I would share with people, is when a thought or feeling comes up, you can ask yourself these kinds of questions. Like, is it real? Is it true? And what's another way that I could look at this? You're giving yourself the invitation, but you have to create the space for yourself to do that. And in the context of work, if you are an incident responder and you're seeing all these alerts, that's what your job is. You have to see, is this real? Is it true? And what does this mean? Right? What could I be wrong about this? And whether that is or is not an incident, you have to go through this process. And as a pen tester, I'm doing this all the time, troubleshooting all the time. So if I get stressed out about something and it's not working, I have to slow down. I have to try again. I have to look again. And then this last piece is communication. It sounds really dumb to say it, but you have to learn to listen. I had a friend that told me, you have to learn to listen and you have to listen to learn. And in my 20s, I was very argumentative, and that was like, oh, okay. And it's not a skill that I think we innately have because everything's moving so quickly. And a lot of times you'll see you're talking to someone and they're not truly listening to what you're saying because they're looking at their phone, they're distracted by something, or they're thinking about what they're going to say back to you. There are whole different workshops on this. And again, I'll share another resource that I found extremely valuable in communication. But essentially, if you can speak from your heart, if you know how you're feeling and you know what you need, you know how to speak to that thing, it resolves a lot of conflicts before they even happen. A conflict is a need that's unexpressed. So let that sink in. So communication to create understanding is a whole different kind of communication too. And conflict is not bad. It's a natural part of living. It just means there's a mismatch or there's a need that's unmet. And as soon as you address that, the relationship can be repaired. And this, again, this is like simple things to say, but it's actually very revolutionary in our current context. I think especially now, people are so deep into their own emotions and ideas and ideologies, they can't listen to each other, they don't know how to talk to each other, they have ideas about each other or themselves and what it means, and it makes it extremely difficult to have this kind of communication. But it is possible. So I'm inviting you to think about that. Just think about it. You don't have to do anything yet. Just think about it. So this is the part where I'm going to invite you into a practice. Before we get to that, does anyone have any questions? I said a bunch of stuff, and maybe it's all like high-level stuff. So any questions about anything I said? Like, you're full of shit, man. No? Okay. Great. So we have some time now to actually do a practice. And I will give you instructions before we get started so that you know what's happening. It is always challenged by choice, right? You decide where you're going to go with this. Make it easy for yourself. Right, so this is a quote from a spiritual teacher, Sri Ramana Maharshi, and his story is really incredible, so if you have time to go look this person up, it's very interesting. But essentially what he says is silence is also a conversation. It is the language of the self and the most perfect teaching. So I can say things to you, but really it is in you that you will learn things. And so I'm going to give you some instructions on how to do practice. Most people, when they think of meditation, they think, oh, you gotta sit in full lotus, and you're like, super still, and that's bullshit. And the other thing that people think is that you're not supposed to think. Well, if you're not thinking, you're probably dead. So it's normal, and it's important that you are thinking. So what I would invite you to do is just notice that you're thinking. Noticing is like noticing that you have pants on. It doesn't mean anything. You just know that you have them on. Does that make sense? So to do this practice, you have choices. There is room. If you want to lie down, you can lie down. I'm serious. There's no wrong way to do meditation either. If you fall asleep, it just means you needed to sleep. In my previous life, I was a sleep technician, and so I watched a lot of people sleep. I know that I'm very boring. I know I can put people to sleep, so I will not take it personally if you fall asleep. And when I used to teach classes and someone would inevitably fall asleep, all I would ever do is just go up to them and like touch their big toe. So you can sit, you can stand. If you're feeling sleepy, that's the way to do meditation too. You can stand. It actually makes you pay attention to what's happening. Like, oh, I'm noticing my feet on the ground. So I will invite you, you can close your eyes or not close your eyes, whatever you feel comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, just let them rest on something. So we're going to start now. So sit in a way that you feel comfortable sitting. And you can move during this. Just don't hit anyone. That's not cool. I have a 3-year-old. Hitting is never okay. Okay, so find a way of sitting that's comfortable for you and notice yourself. Notice your feet touching your shoes, probably resting on the ground. Isn't it interesting that the ground is always there and never lets you go, no matter what? So if you find yourself carried away in your thoughts, a sensation, maybe pain or discomfort, or a feeling, just come back to the ground because the ground's there for you. So, as you're noticing, I'm going to invite you to pay attention to something as an anchor for you, something to come back to, like the ground. Or it can be a physical sensation in your body, because you live in your body. That's where your life is happening. Or your breath, because you're breathing. A better way to say that is your breath is happening. Or your thoughts. And when you come back to these things, see if you notice that you're making a story about what it is. And say, oh. So we'll move through an exercise of noticing your body first. So feel your feet. What is the quality of the sensation of your feet? Your legs, knees. Your hips, your pelvis, your seat. Your abdominal region, the organs inside your abdominal region. There they are doing the thing that makes life happen. The back of your body. Your rib cage. Notice if maybe you feel like you need to change the way your body is. If you do, change it in a way that you're noticing as you're changing it. Your hands. What is the temperature in your hands? Your arms, shoulders, your throat and neck. Your scalp. Did you ever notice your scalp? There it is. Forehead. Eyebrows. Notice if you have tension in your forehead or your eyebrows or your eyes. See if you can soften your eyes. Your cheeks, your nose, mouth, ears, your jaw. The tongue in your mouth, the roof of your mouth. So if you're noticing your body and you're noticing a sensation, maybe you're hearing a sound. Let that sound be. Let that sensation be. You don't need to do anything with them. What if just for right now, nothing meant anything? This is just what it's like right now. You can stay with the sensations of your body. You can go back through that whole thing. Or you can notice your breath. The breath is happening. It moves in, it moves out. Can you notice the temperature when it goes in, when it goes out? What if this is the only thing that needs to happen right now? Breathing in, breathing out. Notice if your breath changes as you pay attention to it. Like, oh shit, am I breathing? Am I doing it wrong? Come back to your breath. You can stay with your breath if you like. Or notice the thoughts or feelings. Thoughts and feelings are like waves in an ocean. They come up, they surface, and then they go back. Sometimes they linger, but just notice them. Maybe that sound brought a thought into your head. Follow it. Where did it come from, and where does it go when you're done with it? Notice if there's any stories that you have. Like a rerun of a TV show or a movie you've seen. And just notice, oh, there it is. What if it doesn't mean anything? So now you have 3 options. There are many more, but you can stay with your breath, your body, or your thoughts or feelings. And we'll just stay with this for another 3 minutes. You can do 3 minutes. I'll be quiet now. returning to the space of your body. Find your breath. And start to move your fingers and your toes. Coming back into the room with everyone else. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Yeah, you can stretch, do what you need to do. So what's the difference between before and after?
Feels more calm.
You feel more calm?
Feel warmer.
Warmer?
Feel relieved.
Relieved? Yeah. Right.
Everything's slowed down.
Slow down. So really the difference between before and after is nothing's different. This calmness or quiet is present all the time, but we forget. There is always something happening, but in the midst of that, there is a kind of quiet that's underneath the surface of that. So practicing is our opportunity to just reconnect with that. We just did a kind of practice, but practice can look like whatever you want it to look like. Whether that is being in conversation with someone that you care about, or doing the dishes, or doing this kind of practice. You can move, you can sit still, you can sing. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you do it. Right? And my teacher says, you do it because it has to be done. It's like brushing your teeth. It doesn't have to be this chore. Right? When you brush your teeth, you're like, fuck, I'm brushing my teeth. No, right? Or you could just be really into brushing your teeth and enjoy the feeling, what it feels like as you're doing it and then after. It could be whatever you want it to be. So this is my invitation to you. Let these practices be something that you can return to and start again all the time. And a lot of the comments that I've had from people over the years as I was teaching them was, I find it really difficult because I find these practices are extremely useful for me in periods of my life, and then I forget all about them and everything's going well. That's totally normal. And if it's like brushing your teeth, do you brush your teeth every day? Maybe, right? Sometimes you forget, sometimes you just can't, things are hard, whatever. But you come back to it, and it's not like, it doesn't mean anything about you, right? Some people don't brush their teeth, right? I'm sure you've met them. Go ahead.
So, in terms of like practicing, do you kind of see it as like a routine? Like, do you recommend in the morning before you start the day, at the end of the day, kind of when it's needed, or both, or all of the above?
I always tell people you have to find what works for you. And at the same time, your life changes, and so your practice will change. What works for you today may not work for you in 6 months, and that's fine. The beauty of mindfulness practice or meditation practice is there's so many different kinds and paths to do. So, everybody's coming up with a new sauce now, right? But really, these practices are, I think, like the oldest form of technology that human beings have. You're connecting with what is here, right? And you're already here. I imagine people in the past looked out into the night sky and were like, holy fuck, all the time, right? Or looked into the fire and were like, what is going on in there? Because mystery is palpable, and it's where we get insight from, and it's where we learn things, and it's where we get surprised and confused. Being confused is not a problem. It's great. It gives you the opportunity to be curious. And curiosity is that place out of which insight and awareness and wisdom and surprise and joy can happen. I really appreciate this question because I think that people think that you're supposed to do it a kind of way. And there are as many ways to practice as there are people. So find what works for you, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, try something else. There's a quote from Rumi who said something like, when you are in the market looking for sugar and you find the vendor that sells the sugar, you don't go keep looking around, do you? You know? So you find what you're looking for and then you do that thing. And then when you need something more, you go look for that thing because it's all there. Does that make sense? So I think I have, there we go. Here's my slide of resources.